podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com alongside Dr. Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today until 6:30. We'll have coverage of the Houston Astros, America's team, as they take on the Philadelphia Phillies, Game 3. As far as I know, that game is still on track to be played as scheduled. There was some conversation, I believe, earlier about maybe this game being postponed because there is some weather in the area. I don't know if that has been decided yet or not, but as soon as we know something, we will share something. Gus, how you going?
I'm good. I am good to go. Yeah, I was keeping an eye on that too, thinking we may have some bright. And it's actually why I flipped it over here to one of the channels on the TV, because I thought if there is any weather-related antics with the World Series game, we'll be the first to know.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'm doing good. It's obviously disappointed in the results Saturday night, but had a blast all day and concert and seeing a million friends. Actually, it started on Friday night over at the Tech Athletic Hall of Fame induction. That was great. Seeing a bunch of old friends, and I mean, you kind of caught the front end of that. They were all streaming by us, waving at me on the radio. So yeah, that was fun.
Love to get your thoughts and comments today on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at doublet973.com. All guests appear via the Benchmark hotline. Yeah, Red Raiders fall in blowout fashion to the Baylor Bears on Saturday. Really for the first time this season, Gus, I feel like, number one, you lost a game that you were favored to win, right? Mm-hmm. It's the first time that's happened this season. And then also you just weren't competitive.
Nope.
That isn't to say that I'm, it's always kind of, not dangerous, but like you never really know what anyone is, thinking or feeling or, all that stuff, whether you're just walking by them in the hallway or if you're watching them play a sport. So it's easy to throw out things like, hey, soft or, no toughness or whatever. That's really hard to gauge. But you just got bullied. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. You got pushed around. They took your lunch money. You cried home to mommy. They did it again and again. You had no answer for them. That game was won for them and lost for Tech on the line of scrimmage, both sides. Your O-line was awful against their front, and that was a matchup that we talked about all week.
Yep. And
we thought that you probably have a bit more success than you did, and you barely had any. I think it wasn't Baron Morton's sharpest game. I think that probably exacerbated the issue.
Yep.
And then you kind of started throwing different quarterbacks in there, and that didn't work. And in fact, it worked against you because you had, a million interceptions. So Red Raiders, I think this is a game that you look back on into the season, missed opportunity. And that's probably the first time I think you could say that about a loss. You were right there with Oklahoma State. You were right there with K-State. But those are probably your two or one of your two Big 12 title game participants. But this one, you barely showed up.
One of the assets we talked about or a couple of the assets we talked about for Baylor, and they hadn't played great, and I don't say they hadn't played great, but they had been a little spotty. Was both lines, veteran offensive line. There was maybe a couple of 6-year guys. I know a couple of 5th-year guys. And because I remember when Coach McGuire talked about it a week ago, he talked about a couple of those guys. Now, I say that. There was a couple guys in that group that he talked about that were recruited in his son's class. His son's now an analyst or whatever for the Carolina Panthers. So,
right.
In other words, we're talking about guys that have been there a long time. And And I think the other thing that we had noted a little bit, or I remember saying, is I didn't think that Baylor would play as loose of a game because they turned it over 7 times in the 2 weeks prior, 2 games prior. It just felt like, I don't think we're going to get that loose of a game again. And we didn't. And, if you're trying to go on the road and quiet a ravenous crowd, you would want to do it behind your veteran O-line controlling things. And, that would be a pretty good way to start it. Hey, there's a 4-yard gain and a 6-yard gain and a 4-yard gain and a 6-yard gain. And there was a lot of that. And the Tech defense got off the field a few times in the first half. I thought one of the really tough things or the bad things for the Red Raiders was a touchdown right before the halftime.
Yeah.
It's 10-3, felt a lot different than 17-3, but
it's kind of like the opposite of what happened against West Virginia.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Where you keep them off the board, and so you enter in with some momentum, whereas the opposite occurred on Saturday.
And this, and then obviously everybody, crowd, all of it got back in at 24-17 because there was a touchdown and then a turnover, as I recall, and then a touchdown, regardless, a turnover, touchdown, stop, touchdown, and it's 24-17. Crowd gets back into it, and then they start turning it over. And I remember even at that point in the middle of the third quarter going, man, we're down 7. And they're showing those stats, up on the
feels
board down there. Yeah, and you're going, whoa, look at the time of possession. And they had run more plays. They had held the ball. Of course, they did everything we said we would do, at least in very general terms, in terms of getting in the huddle, ready, break, come out, snap it with 8 seconds left, over and over and over, and just play big and heavy. And I don't want to call it slow because it actually speeds the clock up because the clock never really stops, maybe quickly to spot the ball after a first down and then back in the huddle. But, like the first quarter just vanished because they held the ball and just ran clock. And as you said, I think it was Baron Morton's freshman quarterback game. He missed a couple of open guys. He was on the run a bunch. He probably didn't take some, Coach McGuire talked about this today. There were some 3-yard gains he could have taken and got the ball out of his hand with a defender in his face instead of trying to beat that guy and then go make a play and do something bigger that probably didn't help. And, I just left there that night thinking, there wasn't a single unit that you go, well, the DB sure didn't play great.
There were no redeeming qualities to that game.
Yeah, there was very little. McNamara might have had a good game. Like nobody wants to talk about that. But, I mean, it was maybe there was a special teams match, but there was no difference made in special teams. But you can't look at it and go, well, the linebackers say, well, the front 4 or the front this or, the O-line or whatever. It was a breakdown across the board. And you take all of that and you put five picks with it. And this time last week we were kind of snickering at Evers going 19 for 49. And whatever.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers, and excuse me. Yeah. So
Morton was 11 of 34.
Right. So it wasn't a whole lot.
3 interceptions.
Yeah. Kind of a mess there. And just it was the kind of thorough whipping that you don't, I didn't walk to the car going, oh, if only that time in the third down we'd have done so and so. No. It was like, that was a whipping.
Just getting started here on Tech Talk. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at doublet973.com. The Juice is next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, it's the Juice on Double T 97.3, Double T 97.3.com, and the Double T 97.3 mobile app, presented by Happy State Bank. The Juice is brought to you by our very good friends at Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. 2 convenient locations here in town, 4th Street and the West Loop behind the Whataburger. Also, Slide Road and 69th Street. And if you can't get out and about today, you can always go to specsonline.com as well. The Texas Tech soccer team, their season likely over after a first-round exit in the Big 12 soccer tournament last night in Round Rock. against Oklahoma. 1-0 was the final. Those two teams seemed destined for extra time, but Oklahoma scored with just 9 seconds left in regulation, and so the third-seeded Red Raiders bow out early. And hard to imagine, hopefully, fingers crossed, but hard to imagine they will get into the NCAA tournament with an at-large bid. If this is it, they finished the season 9-4-6 overall, 5-1-3 in the Big 12. Clearly kind of surged a bit in the second half of the season. Was only beaten once in Big 12 play during the regular season, but needed more of that earlier on, I think, if they wanted to get an at-large bid.
Yeah, RPI at 75 right now.
Yeah, not happening.
Just don't. Again, I don't presume to know all of the ins and outs of the soccer RPI, but if this was baseball or certainly men's and women's basketball, they wouldn't be getting in with that. So, yeah.
Big 12 Conference announced today that Texas Tech's November 12th home game against Kansas will kick off at 6 o'clock and be broadcast on Big 12 Now on ESPN+. Of course, we'll have the game for you here on Double T 97.3. Red Raiders are 17-2 against the Jayhawks during the Big 12 era, and that includes a 12-game winning streak that ran from 2004 through 2018. Auburn has fired football coach Brian Harsin. The decision came just before the school was naming their new AD in John Cohen, former Mississippi State AD. Harsin's firing comes less than 48 hours after the Tigers lost to Arkansas at home by 2 touchdowns. They're 3-5 this season. Harsin finishes with a 9-12 record, and this is one of the only times that I can remember this in the official statement announcing the move. Did you see this? Auburn didn't even use his name.
Really?
Normally you get the, hey, we appreciate so-and-so's service, wish the best for his family, and et cetera, et cetera. They did not mention Brian Harsin by name at all. Auburn University, this is a quote, has decided to make a change in the leadership of the Auburn University football program. President Roberts made the decision, blah, 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 blah. Auburn will begin an immediate search, yada, yada, yada. The end.
Man, Harsin was a highly regarded hire when they made it. Now, I'm not going to tell you it was a great fit, especially not down there when they're, apparently the inmates were running the asylum again, as often happens.
And by inmates, you mean big donors and
just
local folks.
Yeah. The probably the more shocking news out of that deal this weekend was them going and hiring the Mississippi State athletic director basically overnight. I mean, John Cohen, comes in, like Thursday they hired him or whenever that was. I mean, just like that. And Cohen had, Cohen's a baseball guy. He was the baseball coach of Kentucky, baseball coach of Mississippi State, athletic director at Mississippi State. And they just hired, and this wasn't a hire that, it was in July, between schools.
Sure.
I know. One day he was there, and then the rumors flying around today are that they're going after Lane Kiffin. So your move, Ole Miss. They're gonna follow the Tommy Tuberville playbook.
Oh, and by the way, you know who Auburn plays in football this weekend? It's Mississippi State.
Yeah. A good SEC.
How about that?
A good SEC West.
But I think, it's rare, too, because 25 years ago, you wouldn't blink an eye at a former coach, football, baseball, basketball, whatever, being elevated to AD. Like, for the longest time, that was the playbook. But now it seems like everybody is going in such a different direction with that position. You want administration experience, you want marketing experience, you want all these different check boxes checked. And Cohen, as a former coach, doesn't have that background. But what I think this does say maybe about Auburn is we want a strong figure, right, that isn't going to bow to, the Montgomery boosters, right, or the Mobile boosters. And he's not going to get involved in these, intrastate turf wars and can kind of stand up to them. Where, if you're a business type, right? If you're coming up through administration where you've tried to be a kind of a consensus builder and a uniter, not a divider, maybe you don't have that skill set. Whereas I think with a coach, right? I think a coach is probably more used to saying, "Hey, stiff arm,
right?
I'm gonna handle this. Relax." Right?
You know what's funny about that, and I don't disagree with any of that. Just the idea that the regents or whoever it is that make this play and get Cohen in here because he needs someone to tighten this up, and how much of that, like how many of those people that were hired are exactly what you're saying, the Montgomery boosters, for lack of a better word. I think you're using that as more of just a representative title for the faction, this faction of out of control boosters over here and this faction over here. And, how many of those folks are going, yeah, let's go get Cohen. He'll clean this deal up. He'll straighten up those Mobile
right.
boosters.
He's on my side.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, or are they going, hey, I admit it, we're a zoo. All of us in this room, including me. I kind of feel like there's not a lot of that, but maybe just a tough deal, and they went through that regime there over the last 18 months or whatever has been through a ringer, man. And so Cohen's going to be a safe hire and a good fit, as the word fit goes, in the hiring college sports business. And I'm sure that this is forcing Ole Miss's reaction. They're about to be signing up for 10 years and $75 million and a fully guaranteed deal and all that stuff, because they're going to be doing everything in their power not to lose another coach to the school 3 hours that way.
I got 3 letters for you that will determine, I think, whether Lane Kiffin leaves for Auburn or not.
Is it
NIL?
Yeah.
Because Auburn is all in on that deal. Brian Harsin this might not shock you as he came from Boise State, but he was very slow and resistant to kind of dive into the NIL stuff, right? He is very much a coach that would fit in 15, 25 years ago. In terms of kind of his approach, his mentality, he just thought, from all accounts, that going to Boise State to Auburn is not that big of a jump. Ball is ball. Well, that's not really the case. And so Auburn all in on NIL. I think that's one thing where all of those kind of backseat drivers have kind of agreed on and are kind of united on at Auburn. Ole Miss, meanwhile, is not really just crushing it in that department. You would think kind of stereotypical SEC, like everybody's all in. Like, hey, let's throw all kinds of money at it. But for whatever reason, Ole Miss has been reluctant to kind of fully embrace that. Auburn meanwhile is hiring its own assistant AD just for NIL things. And so if you're Lane Kiffin, I think more than just the 7-year, $75 million contract, which will also be a part of it, I'm sure, it's, hey, I need a commitment that there's going to be some NIL activity here that's like long-term and concrete and stable and all those things. I think that will determine whether or not he leaves or goes.
And no way those dudes, when they recruit, aren't recruiting against each other. Tennessee's 6 hours up the road or whatever. Georgia's 3 or 4 that way. Of course, the big one is Bama, 2 or 3 hours away. There's no way you can compete in that deal without going fully all in on the NIL stuff.
More Tech Talk next.
It's every Red Raiders' favorite podcast. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3, Double T 97.3.com with Mike Gustafson and Clint Scott. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today until 6 o'clock. We'd love to get your thoughts and your comments in the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. So, we'll get back to Tech and Baylor. We have a lot of texts to get to. We have 2.5 more hours. We'll get to them, I promise. But I did want to spend some time early on in the show about the news from yesterday, which quickly kind of at least for me, overshadowed what happened on Saturday, which, I was happy to move on from that considering how bad it was. But the Big 12, it being reported by multiple outlets, and I believe Sports Business Journal had it first, but the Big 12 has agreed to a new deal, a 6-year deal with ESPN and Fox, an extension of their media deal, and so you'll remain on those channels with those partners. You will receive a hefty increase in terms of your payout. And not a lot will change. You will have some Fox basketball games, which is a change, which is really good. And you know what the best part about that is, Gus? And I don't know that a lot of people know this.
On the basketball side?
Yes. I don't know that a lot of folks have kind of put this together, because if you're a Big 12 basketball fan, you probably haven't watched just a ton of Big 10 or Big East hoops on Fox or FS1. But number one, Gus Johnson calls games for Fox, so you'll have a little Gus Johnson might be here in Lubbock at some point in the next several years calling a basketball game. But you also realize that, do you know what their theme music is for their basketball broadcasts?
I do not. Really?
How about that?
Seriously?
Round Ball Rock, John Tesh. Originally on NBC.
NBC
right?
is
on NBC.
I hear that and I think 1990s
Chicago
Bulls games.
Absolutely. When the Fox went in on college basketball with the Big Ten and the Big East a few years back, maybe 5 years ago, whatever it was, some of the executives at Fox Sports then had been at NBC in the 90s. And they obviously loved Round Ball Rock, and who doesn't, really?
Sure.
And so they looked into buying the rights for it, and they got it. And so now when you watch college basketball on Fox or FS1, you get Round Ball Rock. So,
no idea.
Here in a few years, when you watch the old Red Raiders on FS1 or Fox, you better tune in right when it starts for some Round Ball Rock.
Do you guys sing the SNL lyrics as well?
No.
Ba basketball, gimme the rock because I'm gonna dunk it. That's a very underrated skit.
I like it.
Have you heard the origin of that song?
No.
The Round Ball Rock?
I only knew about the Tesh, just that it was Tesh.
So Tesh, I guess he was giving some kind of concert, because I guess people pay to go see John Tesh live. I don't understand that. But he was talking about how he was on the road one night, and he had kind of been thinking about that song and the assignment to write a theme song for the NBA and NBC. And so this was in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And so he had inspiration come to him in a hotel room one night. And so he called his house and left himself a message on his answering machine.
Oh, yes.
And it's like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
So he wouldn't forget it.
And he played it. It was actually really cool.
The message to himself. Yeah, that's cool.
He brought the old timey answering machine.
Now that you say that, I have heard that story. Yeah. That's pretty cool, because he plays the melody out to himself so he wouldn't forget it. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's awesome. Well, I mean, where do we start? I think it's good news. I think it's conference stability. I don't think the fundamentals change one bit with regard to the Pac-12. And there's a chance that they might even make a little more money if they go in, if they get some play from Amazon or one of those deals. But it didn't sound like that's really the ultimate desirable deal. They may get a little more money, but the fundamental issue doesn't change. If the Big Ten invites Oregon and Washington, there's going to be some problems for that league. And I still think the Big Ten is the one that's holding the cards as far as the Pac-12's existence goes. The Pac-12 may very well get to where this deal is financially. Most likely, if they do, it'll come with a streamer, like an Amazon Prime type scenario or something. And but I think this doesn't really beyond stability. Tip our cap to Yormark. We thought he was sort of brash, and there was some as this deal was getting closer over the last couple of weeks, a lot of the John Orand and that group were saying this was, that we the Big 12 were looking for $400 million.
Probably going to get $350.
Going to be $350.
Yeah.
It lands at $380. We're done here. As far as just us fans, just if you're just, I don't care about all those numbers and details. The money's going to go up. Right now, we're at around 43. Once you throw in third tier rights and playoff and bowl and March Madness and all that stuff, this figure is believed to end up closer to 50. So the money does go up without Texas and Oklahoma as part of that picture. And Yormark told us he was going to do it, and he did it. And it's a 6-year grant of rights starting in the fall of 25, or with that football season.
Which means, right, that the Big Ten, their deal will expire, I think, a year before yours. And then the Big 12 is back up again. So you get to go back and do this again before the SEC deal expires, before the ACC deal expires, which means in 2030, give or take, if the ACC is still despondent about its situation and Clemson and Florida State can't get out of there fast enough, and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. They can see the end of their current deal.
5-6 years away, yeah.
The Big 12 can say to a Louisville, right, or to a Pittsburgh, or whatever, say, hey, we're here, we're stable, we just got a new deal, right? We have this group of teams. There's a lot of balance here, because I think that's what people don't like. Pac-12 folks will rush to tell you that Oregon and UW are better individual properties than anything the Big 12 has, right? And that might be true, right? I will happily concede that point.
The Texas and OU less,
right?
Yeah,
they have they are more marketable. They have bigger draws, et cetera. That's fine. Yep. I can see that point.
Right.
The issue that the Pac-12 has is there's a pretty big gap there between your maybe fourth best program without USC and UCLA and your 10th. Whereas in the Big 12, that doesn't exist.
Nope.
Right? And if you're putting on programming, you can't, Oregon can't play everybody every week. And so your Kansas and Texas Tech games will be compelling. Your West Virginia and Kansas State games will be compelling more often than not. And I think that's the strength of the Big 12 is in its balance.
Just the sheer entertainment of it.
And with respect to the Pac-12, I agree that they might get close to your number. They might even surpass it, because the Pac-12 can offer Amazon or Apple TV Plus or whatever, hey, we have all this broadcasting equipment. We've got this network. You can use our infrastructure. You can use our people. We can just deliver it to you. But who's going to watch it, dude? Stability is big. I think visibility, exposure is also big. And now you enter this kind of next era of college football, and you're the only Power 5 team with a presence on both ESPN and Fox networks.
Yep, and for us, our streaming component won't change. It's still ESPN Plus. So I think we're, at least out here in this part of the world, we're all pretty comfortable with that. Heck, here in 12 days, we'll be playing another football game on there. So more and more folks have gotten with that program and gotten comfortable with it, and so this isn't going to require yet another subscription or whatever. And that's where I was going with it, just in terms of just our habits, the things we're used to. This renewal of rights doesn't change a thing. And it also makes me feel like, and I don't know that the two are necessarily tied together, but now next year's schedule just feels like it's front and center in terms of, if there was a communications plan here for all of this stuff, hey, let's get the new media rights deal, and then we'll drop the football schedule this week, next week, whatever.
Dana Holgerson, I think today, actually saying it will come out in a few weeks, and he said for Houston fans it will be, quote, eye-opening.
Wow.
More Tech Talk next.
Wow.
Podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Gus, Clint. Gus and Clint. I'm Aaron. Sorry. I'm trying to change it up. I feel like I say a lot of the same things every intro, and so I try to, mix it up. And honestly,
now we have a Gus Clint.
It's the fact that I'm the only one without any cheese puffs is kind of throwing me off. But anyways, we'd love to get your thoughts and comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97 and a Fanta.
You're also the only one without that, so I've got cheesy poofs and
man, dude. If you were in second grade, you would be the living. Right? That is high cotton.
I am in second grade and I am living.
Technically, I don't have any cheesy poofs either.
You just ate yours.
Because
You
mine did
finished
not
yours.
last very long.
There was wings in the fridge.
I did it very carefully. I have to touch knobs and stuff.
When I was a kid, there was a childish Confucius regarding Cheetos. Go to bed, itchy hind end, wake up, stinky finger kind of deal. And you can do that thing with the orange thing as well, with the orange stuff you get all over your hands.
This in the Yates Flooring Center chat line. Hopefully this was Tech's one game this year that the team as a whole did not just show up. I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, it kind of sucks to go from a game where you felt like it was your most complete and best performance, and then the following weekend it is your most complete, no show. Right? You're without a doubt worst performance, and hopefully the pendulum swings the other way this Saturday.
Yeah, and the tough part about it is probably playing the best team of the league at their place, and so the pendulum could swing back the other direction. It still could be tough to win. But replay the last 2 weeks. That Baylor team went to Morgantown and lost to that West Virginia team. And I remember walking in my car the other day. I thought, well, if this last 2 to 3 week deal here isn't the perfect example of your college football as a week to week, week to week sport. If you weren't believing that, then you should believe it now. Because it has never been more emphatic than it is right now. Because that Baylor team that lost to that operation, that came in here and got smoked, then came here and beat us in a way that you go, what? That's just sort of improbable.
This on the chat line, AD, was anything mentioned about this media extension turning the Longhorn Network into a Big 12 network? No. So right now, for most Big 12 teams, your third tier rights, quote, are just on ESPN Plus, right? So it's virtually indistinguishable from the rest of your deal. Whereas before it was on Fox Sports Southwest or whatever it was. Now it's under the ESPN umbrella. Under this new deal, which is set to begin and kick in 2 years, beginning in the fall of 2025, there are no more third tier rights. Right, that is just kind of rolled into this deal. So, basically beginning now and then for the rest of time, you can just purge tier 3 content from your sports vocabulary. It's all under the ESPN Fox umbrella. And so now you're just like before, you're going to watch Big 12 baseball content on ESPN Plus with Mike Gustafson here. You'll have some Big 12 basketball games on ESPN Plus. You'll have some Big 12 football games on ESPN Plus. And that's just part of it. There's no more tier 3. This from Derek on the Yates Flooring Center chat line. Hey, it looks like a good media package. We're still going to be behind the Big Ten and SEC, but hey, we didn't lose any money as a program, and we'll get a decent increase in payout. Given where it looked like we were going to be in the summer of 2021, I'm very happy with the new media deal and the stability it brings.
Yep.
You're going to get more money. I mean, think about it this way, Gus. When this new media deal starts and kicks in, barring something catastrophic and completely unpredictable in the ACC, UCF, which was an FCS team 25 years ago, is going to be getting more money from its conference than Miami and Florida State will from theirs. Like, how does that play in the Sunshine State, right?
Yeah, that sit well. And there's others doing that same thing with the Rutgers deal, with what's about to happen. And the only thing I would say to Derek, I think, was the texter, There was never a question that the Big 12 was going to stay close to the Big 10
Yeah.
in
No.
media deals.
That was never
This
happening.
was never part of the conversation that with this media rights deal that we're going to, hey, somehow we'll magically catch up to the Big 10 and SEC. That was not and perhaps the biggest concern was that there would be a backward step now that Texas and OU were gone. And so the fact that they leave and you still, bump this thing up, I don't know, approximately $6 to $8 grand, hopefully, or $6 to $8 million when it's all said and done per school, per year, pretty good deal.
This in the chat line: with the 4 remaining games left on the schedule, which 2 games do you confidently see Tech winning to be bowl eligible? I don't confidently see them winning any game. I mean, they could win this weekend. They're only about I think it opened at 7.5. I think that's climbed. You could win on Saturday. That's not going to just like stun me and blow me over if you win that game. You could beat Kansas, certainly here in Lubbock. You could beat Iowa State and Ames. I mean, they're kind of teetering here, and then you could beat Oklahoma. You could also lose all 4 games.
Right.
Like no result over these next 4 games will really shock me, barring maybe going 4-0.
Yeah, it would disappoint me because I'm still clinging to 6 wins and bowl eligibility. But yeah, I'm with you. Your wording, the word shock would not be there.
This in the Yates Flooring Center chat line: can we pump the brakes on Kitley being the greatest of all time offensive coordinator? Was it a function of Morton not taking the checkdowns or running the ball more? Run game was there all night. Yeah, it was. It was a bad performance by everybody. Like I don't think there's any sugarcoating it. I don't think that you just blame the players.
Nope.
Or
they
you
have
just
it.
you just blame the coaches. I think it was a collective failure. The coaches get paid the most money here, and so it's on them to fix it. It doesn't affect my kind of long-term optimism about kind of the direction of this deal, but yeah, it was bitterly disappointing because up until this point, you had been in every game. You had kind of performed at a fairly consistent level, and in this case, you were just you got punked, you got bullied.
Yeah, and Kitley expressed some regret that, in hindsight, that they didn't run it more. I don't think he worded it quite as strongly as the running game was there all night, but they had 200 yards rushing. You take away the 50 yards and sacks, it's a different deal. But I think his hindsight there had to do with, if they'd have run it more, they might have protected the line a little bit better. I mean, some of that pass rush. They talked about one of the injuries. I didn't even notice this, but Landon Peterson had left that game with the dinged up shoulder, and some of the things that they would typically do, run more draws and screens and some of those things. And I think Kitley specifically addressed some of the screen game not being there because Peterson is pretty good at blocking that, getting out there and blocking that screen, and his replacement isn't as good. And so it's one of those things that, we all notice when, our quarterback's out of the game or a key guy, but when an interior lineman goes out and you go, okay, whatever, number 72 just got placed at number 67. What's the big deal? But you lose, a little bit of the playbook there.
I think what definitely is clear after Saturday is you desperately need to get way better up front on the O-line this offseason, whether it's transfers, recruiting, processing people. You need to be way better. More Tech Talk next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3.
This on the chat line. From Derek. I'm wondering if the pro rata clause in the new contract is for any program or only certain teams that are approved by ESPN or Fox. Yeah, I think it's just for any team. I think because here's why it works, right? I don't think that you need to, write down in your contract, hey, we will increase proportionally your deal if you add teams, but only if we approve them. No, I think it's we will proportionally expand the deal, the value, if you add new members. And here's why you don't do that just to add rice, right? Because that's all well and good for the current term of the contract. But when you go back to ESPN and back to Fox and say, hey, guys, now we're a 16-team league. We added rice in South Florida. They're going to go, awesome, here's less money.
Right.
So it's in everybody's best interest for the Big 12 or any conference with that kind of clause to expand their brand, expand their reach, increase their conference's value.
I mean, the focus has got to be on Arizona and Utah, and perhaps right behind that, Colorado, Arizona State. And maybe none, maybe two, maybe four.
And one of the questions that I had that I haven't seen this addressed in any of the reporting, which is a bit disappointing because you've had now Pete Thamel take a bite of the apple. You've had CBS Sports take a bite of the apple in terms of kind of following up with their own reporting on the new deal, which Sports Business Journal broke yesterday. I don't know if this means more weekday games.
Yeah.
Because the Pac-12 has been doing some of that, right? A lot of Friday games. ACC playing some Friday games, some Thursday games. The Big 12 has dabbled a little bit. You've had a lot of Thursday. I mean, West Virginia, I think, has had 2 or 3. But I wonder if this new deal means that, hey, Big 12, you might play some Friday games. And I think if you're having to play on a weekday, I'd rather play on a Friday than a Thursday.
I would totally rather play on a Friday, and that has everything to do with
the crowd.
Yes, and making it easy. There's a difference. There's a difference in the fun meter if you're not having to get up the next morning and go to the office versus Thursday. Like, okay, I've got to get up tomorrow. Hurry up, get this game over with. Got to get the kids home. I mean, because that's exactly who gets affected by it. And I don't have that problem right now, but my problem. But as it relates to Thursday games, like, you and little Johnny come rolling in at 10:45.
Yeah, Buff still shows up at 7:20.
Exactly, and he's got to get out of bed the next morning and get to third grade or whatever. Just all of that stuff, and not to mention that it's harder on all of us old people. But yeah, now I would be interested. Of course, not really an ESPN problem, and we may be past this, unfortunately, good or bad, because we're headed toward more calendar conflicts between the NFL and college football in the coming years.
Sure.
I mean, there's been a lot written about that, but not that they're going to fight over Saturdays and Sundays in September and October. That part, I think they're all in agreement on. But they're on top of each other on Thursdays, and they're about to be on top of each other in December.
I wonder, too, though, if you're ESPN, right, are you as willing to concede Thursday nights now that the NFL game is actually on Prime?
No.
Because now if you just have linear cable, or if you don't have Prime, or you don't want to dedicate your television to that for 3 hours, now you might be the next best option for a lot of folks.
This deal doesn't state, you're exactly right, and this deal doesn't state there's going to be 3 Thursday games every year.
Right.
It just feels like there's going to be more of that. The only thing I would ever ask for with regard to Thursday, usually those things are announced well in advance, months in advance, even perhaps even in the springtime, by June or something. But give fans, especially, and it's a big deal in Lubbock, Texas, man, because we're as remote as we are. It's probably a big deal in Pullman, Washington, too, when they got a lot of fans coming from 4 hours from Seattle out to Pullman, across the state. That's a big deal. Don't enter into that flippantly, because it affects our ability to fill that stadium. A lot of the Dallas fans, it's tougher on Midland, Odessa, Amarillo, Abilene.
The Petroplex.
That's just a tough deal, man.
This in the chat line, the BYU channel was saying this morning that ESPN would retain all Tier 3 rights with this new deal. Yes. Yeah, Tier 3 is no longer a thing anymore, essentially. You can just kind of flush that from your vocabulary. RIP Tier 3 content, born 2010-ish, died 2022-ish.
I don't think and I don't think your behavior as a fan to turn on the TV and watch John Harris and Chris Level do some non-conference hoops and then watch me and John or Chris Sylvester do home baseball games. I don't think a lot of that content's going to change, but I think the way it's being paid for and some of those things, maybe the way it's written up contractually is what's going to change. I don't think your need as a fan, you're not going to need a new remote control or a new smart TV to deal with this. Yeah, it's going to feel very familiar.
This in the chat line, AD, do you know who was the first European to reach the Americas? It's believed to be Leif Erikson, who would have done that hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus.
You've been listening to the Tech Talk podcast from Double T 97.3. Check out Double T973.com for more from Lubbock Sports Station.